Hey guys, welcome to the Elevate online experience. If you've been with us before, welcome back. And if you haven't, it's awesome to have you. It's awesome that we can still get together on our online platform, even if we can't physically in a building. And to all the mums out there, happy Mother's Day. If you guys at home are enjoying our content so far, like our channel, subscribe to us so you get the notifications during the week, and share us with your friends. Today's beautiful worship music is coming from our good mates at Gateway Church in Melbourne.
And every day I wake up and be by my side. When I hear your heartbeat, I come alive. Whoa, whoa, I come alive. Jesus, be the first thought inside my head. Every step that I take, I want you there. Whoa, whoa, I want you there. Lord, I know that you will never change, so I'm trusting you with all my days. You are the first and the last. God of my future, God of my past. Your love remains the same from the start. 'Cause you are the first and the last. 'Cause you are the first and the last. Every day I wake up, be by my side. When I hear your heartbeat, I come alive. Whoa, whoa, I come alive. Jesus, be the first thought inside my head. Every step that I take, I want you there. Whoa, whoa, I want you there. Lord, I know that you will never change, so I'm trusting you with all my days. Come on! You are the first and the last. God of my future, God of my past. Your love remains the same from the start. 'Cause you are the first and the last. You are the first and the last. Oh. And when everything is falling down all around, your word is my only solid ground, forever standing in you, God. And when everything is falling down all around, your word is my only solid ground, forever standing in you, God. It's Lord, you are Lord, 'cause you are the first and the last. God of my future, God of my past. Your love remains the same from the start. You are the first and the last. 'Cause you are the first and the last. Come on. You love with no reservations, and you're not looking for perfection. And there's no need me pretending. I'll give you everything. I'll give you everything. And you deserve my full attention. Nothing less than my devotion. Speak to me, to me and I will listen. And I give you everything. I give you everything. Come on, sing it out. You can have my heart. Yes, you can. You can have my heart. You can have my heart. You can have my heart. Be the Lord of my emotions. Set me free from selfish motives. Ooh. And search me till there's nothing hidden. And I'll give you everything. I'll give you everything. You can have my heart. 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 Sing you can have my heart. You can have my heart. 'Cause my heart is yours forever. My heart is yours forever. My heart is yours forever. Yes, it is, Lord. My heart is yours forever and ever. Oh, my heart is yours forever. My emotions are yours, God. My heart is yours forever. You can take my plans, Lord. My heart is yours forever. Oh, I give to you, Lord. My heart is yours forever, forever. And if you want my heart, you got it, you got it, you got it. If you want my heart, you got it, you got it, you got it. If you want my heart, come on, church, you got it, you got it, you got it. If you want my heart, you got it, you got it, you got it. If you want my heart, you got it, you got it, you got it. If you want my heart, you got it, you got it, you got it. If you want my yes, you got it, you got it, you got it. If you want my heart, you got it. You can have my heart. Take it, Lord. You can have my heart. You can have my heart. Come on, let's just hear the voices sing this out. Can you surrender, feel the ring? Come on. You can have my heart. 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 Yes. Yes.
Today, from the Elevate Church family, we'd like to give a special shout out to our mate Lucas, coming all the way from Nigeria. Today is week 5 of What Are You Expecting? Taken by our very own Mark Pomeroy. Enjoy it.
Hey, well, shout out to all of the mums joining us on Mother's Day. Well played, making the time to be part of our online experience. Hopefully, maybe some of you have already been a little spoiled so far today, and may the festivities continue for the remainder of the day. Also, I want to give a shout out to those of you who are actually listening to this via our podcast. I think really this series, What Are You Expecting, we've received the most amount of encouraging feedback than we have from any series that I can actually remember. And comes as no surprise that throughout the last month, our podcast audience has grown dramatically. In fact, we've had more than 4 times more downloads in the last month than we normally have. And that's actually led to a few new countries joining our top 10. So I want to give a shout out to Pakistan, to Bangladesh, and to a new number 4 that's actually bumped Australia down to number 5 last month, and that is Nepal. So welcome to those of you joining us from those 3 countries. And we also had 2 new entrants into our top 3. Now, number 1 last month was the USA, and the USA, you guys have held number 1 position for a little while, so well played. Great to have you with us and see the reach growing throughout the USA. Though 2 new entrants into our top 3. Number 3 is France, which my surname is Pommery, which derives from France, and my ancestry traces back there, so I'm very proud to have you joining us from France. Welcome. And number 2 is India, which we're thrilled to have you. And we're also thrilled, I need to say at this point in time, to see that there's a growing global push to assist your country, those of you in your country struggling with the 3rd wave of the pandemic. So we are praying for you, but more than praying for you, there's also help coming. So we sincerely hope that the situation will turn around, and great to have you joining us and leaning into God's word and what God's doing, even in a very challenging time for those of you over there. I wonder how many of you have heard the expression, or even maybe have said the expression that's very much become a cliche, and it's this: people don't like change. Now, I am on the record on multiple occasions as pushing back on that very idea. People don't like change. I don't actually agree that that is true. For example, if you were to get a letter or a phone call from a mysterious lawyer tomorrow, and the lawyer said to you that you just inherited $20 million from a great uncle that you never even knew existed, things would be about to change for you. $20 million out of nowhere would be about to change for you. And I'm pretty sure in that moment you like change. So to just say that people don't like change, it's simply not true. I think what's more accurate is to say that some people don't like some change. And for the most part, the sort of things that some people don't like about some change is the uncertainty that lies ahead, the need to move from the familiar, the fact that change requires us to move from the familiar into something that's less familiar, and the uncertainty and the unknowns that brings. I think that's the thing that can be unsettling for people. But the reality is that in life, things are going to come our way. Change is going to be required of us that we had no choice in. We didn't get to vote. We didn't get a say in the matter. It just happened. And look, the last 12 months, I mean, come on. Here's been a year where things have been happening locally and globally that have changed, and we've had no vote in it. We've had no say in it. You know, the obvious one is the global pandemic. That has changed so much of how we live daily, weekly, monthly, how we work, how we interact, what we can do, what we can't do. And we didn't get to vote in that. We've had to adapt. We've had to be resilient. We've had to make the sort of modifications, but there was always uncertainty, and it still exists in certain parts of the world. There's been political tensions in various countries around the world, economic tensions, jobs going up, jobs going down, industries being challenged, and all of the ramifications that come with that. We've seen racial injustice, and we've seen protests around racial injustice, and all of these things. They're things that we didn't vote on. These are things that we didn't get to decide, but they've caused us to have to change. The thing I want to say and insert into the narrative is that there is one thing that never changes, one constant in the midst of changing circumstances, changing cultures, changing climates around us. There's one thing that's always reliable, that's always dependable, and that is who God is, which is the essence of this series that we're landing today. We've called it, What Are You Expecting? And this, the declaration, or the thing that we've been drilling into for the last 5 weeks, is actually a declaration that God made about himself, about who he is, and about what he does. And it's based on him declaring who he is as giving us a certainty that we can expect God to do certain things, that he does who he is. And it's kind of like, it's either a Did You Know series, or it's a Don't Forget series. Either way, these are bedrock truths that God revealed about himself. And if you ever were to wonder if they were important, if you were to ever question whether they were important or not, know this. Not only did God declare them very early in recorded history, he inspired various other prophets and authors and songwriters throughout the early part of the Bible, the Old Testament. This was like the greatest hit. This was the one that was played on repeat. This is the thing that God said about himself that has been the most requoted, rewritten passage in the whole of the Old Testament, which really just underlines the fact that not only did God want a certain group of people, which was the Israelites who had escaped from captivity, not only did he want them to know these truths, but he wanted every generation to follow to know these truths. And today, we are the current generation that God wants us to know these truths about himself. And so this is what he declared. Now, he declared these to Moses, and Moses was to then be the messenger that then communicated this to God's people. And this was true for them then, and it's true for us today. This is what God said. Yahweh, he's announcing who he is. I'm here. I'm the Lord, and this is who I am. This is the essence of my nature. I'm the God of compassion and mercy. I'm slow to anger and filled with unfailing love and faithfulness. There's 5 things that God declared about himself. And these have been the 5 things that we've drilled into over the last 5 weeks, which we're going to land the 5th one today. That firstly, that God's a God of compassion. The big idea there is that he cares for you, and when you need his help, he will act on your behalf. Week 2, the second thing that God declared about himself is that he's a God of grace, a God of mercy, a God of favor. That he wants to give you, he wants to give us a leg up. Week 3, he's a God of patience. In this cancel culture, aren't you glad to know that God doesn't cancel you even when you mess up? Last week, we hit the 4th one, the 4th thing that God declares about himself, that he's a God of unfailing love. And we did a walkthrough of some of the high points of Joseph's life to learn that God never loses your number. God will be working in the background and working to weave things together for our good. So I want to encourage you, if you've missed any of those weeks, to either go back and watch them on particularly our YouTube channel, for example, or you can, if you're on the move, jump onto our podcast. We're on all of the major podcast platforms, and go and revisit them. Or even if you just want to be reminded again of any of those, go back and hit them up. Today is this fifth thing that God said about himself, the idea that we can expect God's faithfulness. Now, quite a number of years ago, some friends of ours who have a boat, they invited us for a day on their boat, which included the opportunity to go water skiing. Now, I had never water skied before, but one thing I learned very quickly about water skiing is there's not really the opportunity to graduate from super beginner to intermediate. I mean, you get on the skis, you get dropped in the water, you grab a hold of this bar at the end of this rope, and the boat has to get up to a certain minimal viable speed for this thing to work. The problem is that you go from sort of naught to this minimal viable speed in like a split second, which I rapidly discovered. And you have to ideally master getting the lean, getting the knee bend, getting the balance, getting the arm positioned correctly. You have to get them all right in that split second, because if you don't, boom, it's game over. And I'm speaking from experience, because this boat went from me just sitting in the water, grabbing a hold of this stick, to me face planting and being dragged headfirst through the water, doing what in skiing parlance is called a yard sale or a garage sale. In a moment, I went from sitting patiently in that water to things going everywhere. Skis going in one direction and another, my limbs going in one direction or another. The rope, actually the rope didn't go anywhere because I didn't let go. And yes, the people on the boat were yelling at me, "Mark, let go of the rope." But it is impossible to hear them when your head is underwater and you're being dragged through the water at whatever knots we were doing. I didn't let go of the rope, which is a terrible idea when you're learning to water ski and you've fallen off. But it is exactly the thing to do when it comes to following God, that at no time, even when the circumstances are causing our life to feel like we're having a garage sale, don't let go of the rope. God's faithfulness can hold you together even when things are falling apart. And we're encouraged to not let go of him because he declares he's a God of faithfulness. In other words, he'll never let go of us. Here's something else that ties into this that was said about God and declared in the book of Deuteronomy. He is the rock. Yep. You thought Dwayne Johnson was the rock. No, God is the original rock. He's the OG rock. His deeds are perfect. Everything he does is just and fair. He is here's the word, faithful God who does no wrong. How just and upright he is. Again, it's being declared that God's the rock, that he's faithful. Those two metaphors, those two declarations are tied together. And it's no surprise when you understand back in history, in that culture, when they thought about a rock, they thought about something that never moves. They thought about something that never changes. They thought about something that can protect them. You know, a fortress was made of rock, solid rock. And they would have thought of solid rock as being something that you can actually build a stable and dependable life on, as being the ultimate foundation, which Jesus, several thousand years later, he taught the very same thing. He taught, it was a parable, a story, but it made a point that's very, very true then, true today. He told the story of two guys who built houses, similar houses. The exception being one of them built his house on sand. The other was wise enough to build his house on rock. And then once the houses were complete and they'd moved in, a storm came, same storm, similar houses. The storm came through and one of those houses was destroyed and the other one remained upright. Well, you don't win a prize for guessing which one's which. The one on shifting sand was the one that got destroyed, the one that went on a garage sale. The house built on the rock is the one that remained. So if you want to move into this next season, regardless of even where you're at, you might actually be in a really great place right now. And God bless you if you are, and we can certainly be thankful for that. Or you might not be in a great place right now. Or what's even more likely is you'll have some aspects of your life that aren't so crash hot and others that are actually pretty great. In all of this, if you want more peace, more joy, less uncertainty going into your next season, then trust in and expect God's faithfulness. I wonder how many of you are familiar with the term gaslighting. Now, you can Wikipedia the etymology of this phrase gaslighting, but basically the term has to do with or describes the act of when a person knows something isn't true and yet tries to convince other people that it is true. They try to be so persuasive and manipulative and hyperbolic in their language. They know it's not true, but they try to present this as being true to the point where the other person starts questioning themselves like, oh, I thought this wasn't true, but the way they're putting it or the passion they're putting into it, maybe I'm wrong. And it sows a splinter of doubt in your mind. That's called gaslighting. And here's the good news. Whilst some politicians might gaslight, whilst some of your friends might gaslight, whilst some of your bosses or colleagues might gaslight, whilst some of the media outlets might gaslight, God never gaslights. When God says something, it's true, without question, without reservation. And God never gaslights about who He is, and God never gaslights about what He does. When He says He's the God of compassion and mercy and patience and unfailing love and faithfulness, you can take that to the bank. There's no gaslighting. In fact, when God says something, we say when God promises something, the mistake that we could make is to run the notion of God's promises through the same notion we run the kind of promises we make with or get from other people. Like human level promises. Human level promises are when we tell somebody we're going to do something. Well, hopefully you follow through, but we all know that not everyone does 100% of the time. Human level promises might be where you shake hands on it. Let's shake hands on it, which should mean something. But again, deals done on a handshake can and have been broken. Or we might even step it up a level, put it in writing, make a contract. Well, there are courtrooms around the world filled with people and organizations that are disputing the validity of this so-called ironclad contract that they put into. So God doesn't make just verbal promises. He doesn't just stop at handshake agreements. He doesn't merely put things into writing, although He does all of those things. He has this next level arrangement that He's made with His people, and it's called a covenant. Now, I get it. That's not a word that we use in everyday, parlance these days. I understand that. But let me define it, all the more reason why I need to define it. And this is a simple definition of covenant, an agreement which brings about a relationship of commitment between God and his people. An agreement which brings about, so it starts with the agreement, a relationship of commitment between God and his people. And the great thing about covenants, and the reason that we can rely on God's covenants, is because God himself initiates them and God himself guarantees them. They're not initiated by us because we're flawed, we're not unfailing, we're not faithful 100% of the time. And they're not guaranteed by us, they're guaranteed by God, God who is faithful. And God initiated a covenant way back in the beginning of history with a guy named Abraham, and that covenant was declared with Abraham for the entire people of Israel. And the Jewish faith still hold that covenant to be true today. I didn't have time to go into that covenant, but it essentially boils down to God declaring, I will be your God and you will be my people. And that was a once-off for all time deal, initiated by God and guaranteed by God. And then for us who are Jesus followers and believe that God sent his one and only Son into the world, and that his one and only Son, Jesus, died for our sins, died on our behalf, and then rose from the dead, we actually have access to a new covenant. And we know this because Jesus himself declared it, because this is how God's covenants work. God initiates them and God guarantees them. Well, this is the one that Jesus has offered to people who choose to place their faith in him. This happened at the time that we now call the Last Supper, which was a dinner that Jesus had with his closest followers. It turns out to have happened very shortly before he was arrested and ultimately nailed to a cross. He said this to his followers. After supper, he took another cup of wine and said, "This cup is the new covenant between God and his people." So they knew about the covenant that God had with Abraham and Israel. Jesus said, this is the new covenant. And with Jesus, everything that's new is better because he's Jesus. It's an agreement confirmed with my blood, which is poured out as a sacrifice for you. This new covenant was about Jesus initiating this relationship, that we were separated from God by sin, and that Jesus himself was going to pour out his blood that was going to wipe our sins clean and was going to allow us to have a right relationship with God if we put our faith in Jesus. That was new and that was better. Jesus initiated it and Jesus guaranteed it. And I'm glad Jesus did it, because if it was you doing it or if it was me doing it, we would have failed already. Jesus is the Son of God. He's faithful. I came across this very honest social media post, and I read it and I thought to myself, boy, I know that to be true of me as well, but I'm not sure I would have had the courage to put it into such ironclad terms and put it out there onto socials. But listen to this. Someone wrote this on socials. I've been a Christian, a follower of Jesus, for 5,423 days. And I've been unfaithful to Jesus in each of those 5,423 days. But he's been faithful to me in each of those 5,423 days. Jesus has chosen not to remember my sins, and I've chosen not to forget his faithfulness. So as much as God never lets go of us, we also need to respond by never letting go of him. So let me land really quickly with 3 of Marco's pro tips when it comes to remembering God's faithfulness. The first one is to look back. If you've been following Jesus for some time, look back at the times where he's shown you compassion. Look back at the times where he's been patient, where he's been merciful, where he's shown you his favor, where he's demonstrated his unfailing love to you. because the same God that did those in your past can and will do those in your present and your future. So we can actually grow in our faith, grow in our confidence, grow in our commitment, and remain that we remember God's unfailing love and faithfulness by looking back when he has been showing us those things. He's been faithful. Look back, look up. Look up, God, what are you doing right now? What are you doing right now in my life, for my life, through my life, that I need to see more clearly, that reminds me that you're still at work and that you're faithful today? And then finally, look ahead. What could this same God who's been faithful in your past, who's being faithful in your present, what could that same God do into your future? What would compassion look like for you? What would patience look like for you? What would favor look like for you? What would his unfailing love look like for you? And when I say for you, I don't just mean for you so you can be more blessed and you can be more entitled and you can be, no, what could the unfailing, faithful God do for you? Absolutely. In you and through you, that we can be instruments that demonstrate these vital truths that God declared about himself to the world and to the sphere that we live in.
If you enjoyed that message, head over to our Elevate AU app where you can dig into the group notes and get stuck in during the week. If you would like to partner with us and help us reach into and build into people just like Lucas, the ways to give can be found below. Once again, guys, so good to have you. Check in again with us next week as we have an awesome guest speaker.